kind introduction. Sorry, can you see the slides? Yeah.
Yes, you can see your slides. No problem.
No problem. Okay. So sorry if the Wi-Fi may not be as clear as I would like it to be. I'm currently actually based in Brunei. So sometimes the Wi-Fi tends to come in and out. But in any case, I hope that today we can have an interesting conversation over this issue of the Mara Hertogh controversy. All of us, I'm sure, are very much acquainted with this event in our history and how it has been presented in many of the school textbooks. So what I would like to do today is not going to be a lecture as mentioned by Huilin, but it's more of a discussion, is to try and share about the various conceptions of the Mara Hertogh controversy, some of the reinterpretations that have been put out by scholars, including myself, and also some of the lessons that we may consider to somehow teach the students that we encounter in our classes. And again, as I was saying just now, I want to try to make this session not ultra academic, but more practical for our purposes in the classrooms. So as mentioned by Huilin just now, this is how I teach my students in the university. I use what I call as the 15-5 formula. Why I use this 15-5 formula, the reason is very simple. The young people nowadays, including ourselves, we don't have long attention spans anymore. They only listen to you for 15 minutes. I can vouch for this because I have kids, 6 of them, from the ages of 22 all the way to 8 years old. And I can see the changes in their attention spans. If the kids in the past, they can at least listen to you for 30 minutes or 40 minutes. Nowadays, after 10 minutes, you lose them. So we're going to have me talking for 15 minutes. And then we're going to have a 5 minutes plus 5. In soccer, we say we always have injury time of discussion. And sometimes some of this discussion may drag a little longer. It's okay. The whole point of it is to have a session that is of a two-way thing. So as I was mentioning just now, today's discussion is basically centered around a book that I published many years ago. This was based on my PhD thesis. That was published in 2009. And back then, when I was writing this thesis, I was very much struck with the manner to which the Mara Hertogh controversy has been covered in our textbooks. So what I did for the PhD is basically to criticize how our national textbooks have actually rendered this event and provide a new way of looking at this very famous episode in our history. So we're going to talk about it a little bit more. I'm sure Huilin has already passed to you the PDF copy of this book. Looking back at my own work, I feel quite embarrassed actually. You know, we always write books and then we dislike the books that we write, and that happens. It's one of those things, you know, that you did early in your life. You look back telling yourself, why did I write this crap to begin with? But anyway, we're gonna criticize whatever that I wrote, and let's talk about it a little bit more. So let me begin first with the whole idea of conceptions. What I mean by conceptions here is how we have conceived this event and how we are made to, in a sense, understand it in the manner to which we are told within the national narrative. Whenever we talk about the Mara Hertogh controversy, a few steps or sequence come to mind. The episode basically involved a 13-year-old Dutch Muslim girl. We know that she was raised as a Muslim after being given to a Javanese family, namely to this lady called Cik Aminah. And Mara Hertogh was actually her original name, and her name was changed to Natra. So amongst Muslims, especially if you go to Malaysia, they do not like Mara Hertogh to be called Mara Hertogh. They prefer the word Natra or Nadra. And that was one of the criticisms that I got when I published the book. Malaysian scholars are telling me she's not Mara Hertogh, she's Natra. Whatever the case is, the fact of the matter is that her original name is actually Mara Hertogh. And when she was 13 years old, nearly reaching 14 years old, her Catholic parents wanted her to return to the Netherlands. And that caused a lot of issues to come about. Mainly, there was a legal battle. And in the end, after 2 different legal battles, the British court basically ruled in favor of parental custody. And they used basically British law plus a bit of Dutch justifications of what they call as the original domicile of Mara Hertogh's parents. But the whole event basically stirred public sentiments. And when the media, such as Chow Pau, Utusan Melayu, and all other newspapers, Straits Times, and so forth, made a big issue out of the whole thing and sensationalized the whole episode, that led to a riot that broke out between 11th to 13th December 1950. So we know basically from the textbooks that we have been served that 18 people basically died and hundreds others were injured. Now, what's most important about this event is that it is the first ever riot that broke out in post-war Singapore. And that's why it was so iconic. And for the British, it was the first time that the Muslims in Singapore, at least, in the past, there was the Sepoy Mutiny in 1915, but the Sepoys were mostly people from India, some of which were from later on known as Pakistan. It was the first time that Muslims who were based in Singapore, domiciled in Singapore, actually went out on a riot. And that made the British basically, in a sense, they were spooked by the whole event because they didn't know that Malays, especially, whom they saw as most loyal to the colonial rulers, as being able to lead a resistance against them. And that is why this event is so much remembered in our history. It was the first time where Muslims came out on a riot and to find as many white people as they could and killing some of them. Okay, so this is what we basically teach in our classes. I was also a history teacher in Admiralty Secondary School, so I know the feelings of the teachers here. And these are the very things that we actually emphasize in class, the facts that we always underline. And of course, we show them these pictures of Muslims going out, protesting, which led eventually to the riots. And these are some of the pictures that you can get from National Archives of what actually happened. Now, this picture, I wanted to show this picture because it's so interesting, because this car was basically burnt at a place where there is a Chinese shop. So Tai Yu Lam ladies dress making shop. So this was along Arab Street. But what's most important, and this later on when we talk about the riots, we can understand later on that the riots were not merely a Muslim riot, that this event basically happened with cooperation from people from different communities. So not only Muslims actually came out to kill people or to injure people, the non-Muslims, the Chinese gangsters all joined the episode, and some Indians who are not actually Muslims were supplying the rioters with food and drinks to make the riots to escalate the riots even more. Okay, so we know these facts from the history of the Mara Hertogh riots. Now, what's interesting about what has been taught in many of our school textbooks is that there is first the problem of ethnicization of the riot. It has always been seen as a Muslim riot or a riot that is very Malay in character. Now, there is a lot of problem when we look at the riots in that manner. As I was saying just now, when the police basically arrested thousands of people in 1950, they found that non-Malays and non-Muslims were very much part of that riot itself. So there is this problem of ethnicization where we reduce violent episodes such as these as something that was initiated only by a given group. The character of multiracial and multicultural Singapore is such that when things like this happen, a lot of groups were actually involved. And a lot of the people who were involved were usually people who were already ready for action. So that's the first. And this is something that I want to highlight first. And when I was doing my PhD, this was the very thing that I wanted to challenge, that it was not a Muslim riot. Rather, it was a riot involving people who were very much unhappy with the state of things. And then later on, we will talk about this point. Secondly, when we look at the Mara Hertogh riots, there is a problem of localization. It is often seen as a Singaporean episode. Now, take note, there was no such thing as the nation state as we know today as Singapore in the 1950s. We only became independent in 1965. We can push the date back to 1963 during the creation of Greater Malaysia, or even far behind to 1957 when we got our self-government. But the point being that these riots or this kind of episodes in Singaporean history is not supposed to be seen as a local episode. Rather, it was an episode that was very much influenced by forces that was larger than Singapore itself. A lot of what happened on the ground were very much motivated by things that happened outside Singapore. And the books that we are currently using do not emphasize on this point. So that's the second thing. And because we have localized this event, the ethnicization becomes even more sharper. Precisely because we think that the event has been influenced only by forces that are local to Singapore, we then consign the riot to being a Malay or a Muslim problem. And that leads to the third point, that the riots or the controversy has always been seen from the perspective of security, the securitization of the riots. If you look at a lot of coverage on the Mara Hertogh riots, there's always this emphasis that if we do not guard our security enough, this is what is going to happen to our country. And the riots then become a source of moral panic for many people who are studying it. One scholar by the name of Michael Hill wrote in one of the articles that the Mara Hertogh case has become something of an icon in the Singapore state's presentation of religious strife in its history, and has been revisited on a number of occasions as an instance of the destabilizing potential of religious conversion. The riots have always been used to show that if you do not actually, in a sense, take care of a given ethnic group in the right way, this is what is going to happen. Now, there is nothing wrong with looking at events from a security angle, but when you securitize the event in that you only look at the event merely from the perspective of security, you do not see other facets of the event that can help us understand how communities cope with the aftermath of the riots. Yes, the riots happened. Yes, it affected the security of Singapore. Yes, there was a security problem because the British were basically lame ducks after the war. They couldn't actually manage a lot of their colonies because Britain, as a colonial power, was basically bankrupt. But there were many other things that were happening besides the security issues that we are always concerned with. That communities actually banded together, they came together to try and resolve some of the issues that crop up precisely because of the riots. So I'm going to stop now because it's already 15 minutes and ask all of you here, what is your view of prevailing conceptions of the Mara Hertogh controversy? So all of these things that you have taught your students, what do you think of it? I want to hear some responses.